I can just non-stop throw shurikens.
See, I don't.
I'm pretty sure
I don't
we've
touch
shattered
the
him
ground
about
anymore.
80 times by now.
Oh my god.
Hello everyone, I have a shatter addiction, and so will you after watching this build. I think it's fair to say that Stasis Hunter has never been better. To say Bungie buffed Stasis for this episode would be the understatement of the year. Some of you may remember the last time Bungie said they were buffing Stasis and what we ended up with, which was absolute solar dominance. So I went with this episode in a very cautious manner before believing that Stasis would actually be viable and compared to something like Prismatic. But you know what? I'm sold. I've been screwing around with Stasis Hunter for a day now, and I feel like I'm playing the slot machines, except, you know, I actually win and don't file for bankruptcy. Enter the latest addition to the Stasis Hunter kit, a new exotic helmet called Mask of Fealty. This helmet has a perk called Null Factor, which states Withering Blade hits and bounces create a small stasis crystal and refunds a portion of melee energy. Using Withering Blade to shatter crystals or frozen targets releases a spread of Withering Blades. Thanks to this new exotic, we will be making more crystals than Walter White, but not only that, we'll be deleting and shattering any enemies within the radius of any of our abilities and crystals too. Let's quickly go over our Revenant Kit just to show you how it synergizes with the helmet. So obviously the Super Slams and Squall, no other change there obviously. For our dodge, we have Gambler's Dodge for our ability melee recharge as soon as we dodge near an enemy. We have any jump you want, Withering Blade of course, and finally Cold Snap Grenade. This will come into play with everything else we're using, but you could change this technically speaking if you wanted. I personally love Cold Snap in this build. For our aspects, we have Grim Harvest and Touch of Winter. Grim Harvest says defeating slowed or frozen targets creates stasis shards. These shards grant melee energy when picked up by you or your allies, and while Grim Harvest is equipped, picking up stasis shards grants stacks of frost armor, which also helps us in several ways. Meanwhile, Touch of Winter states that your Cold Snap Grenade, for me personally, Seekers duplicate after freezing a target and create a stasis crystal on detonation. This is also very key. As for the fragments, I'll throw them up on screen here at the top while you guys watch gameplay, but we have 5 of them, and we're going to go from left to right. The first one is going to be Whisper of Rhyme. Your frost armor has increased duration and maximum stack count. Number 2 is going to be Whisper of Conduction. Nearby stasis shards track to your position. Number 3 is going to be Whisper of Shards. Shattering a stasis crystal temporarily boosts your grenade recharge rate, and shattering additional stasis crystals increases the duration of this benefit. Number 4 is going to be Whisper of Hunger. Increase the melee energy gained from picking up stasis shards. And finally, Whisper of Fissures. Increase the damage and the size of the burst of stasis when you destroy stasis crystals or defeat a frozen target. So to simplify the game plan, this is basically what we're trying to do. We're trying to abuse our exotic armor piece as much as humanly possible via our melee, which is Withering Blades, stasis crystals, which we will make through our melee or just our abilities and weapons in general, and then also have frost armor, which gives us DR, but also synergizes with other key pieces of this build. While we are comboing off on enemies, when we're killing them with shatters, crystals, our melee, and so on, we're going to be making stasis shards. When we get stasis shards, we'll replenish our abilities to the point where we will continuously keep getting our melee back over and over and over again, and if for some reason you don't have your melee back, you also have your dodge to fall back on to get an extra copy while you're doing your loop. The core piece to getting your engine started is to create a stasis crystal on the field near your enemies. This can be done either through abilities, or you can opt to use weapons that have things like Headstone. For example, you have Ias Luna from Grasp, or you have Clum's Terminus from King's Fall. You just kill an enemy with a precision hit, they make a crystal on their body, and then you use that to fuel your melee and then build your engine, making everything shatter around that enemy you just killed. The other easy way to get your combo going is to use your Cold Snap Grenade as an opener. Once you use your Cold Snap near a bunch of enemies, it'll seek out one enemy, but then duplicate to freeze others around it, and when it does, it'll create a stasis crystal on its detonation, and then you use that crystal as your engine with your melee and go nuts. After dealing with your initial group of enemies, Grim Harvest will now proc and it will activate, giving you a bunch of melee energy back, as well as giving you frost armor when you pick up said stasis shards. Real quick, I think it's a good idea to mention the artifact mods for this build as well, since we're here and people are going to be curious. So for stasis mods, we have one with frost in the second column, then Wind Chill and Crystalline Converter in the third column. We have Armor of Aramis and Hail the Storm in the fourth column. And then finally, Brain Freeze and Served Cold in the 5th column, although I will say Brain Freeze is not mandatory and you can swap it out for something else if you'd like. Some of these also have boosts on them. For example, Wind Chill gives us stacks of Frost Armor when we have precision hits with stasis weapons, but also there's a boost that says dealing stasis weapon damage to slowed targets has a chance to spawn a stasis shard, which then helps us get our melee back. And then we have other things like Hail the Storm, which is shattering stasis crystals, releases shards of ice that damage and slow targets, but also there's a boost that says shattering frozen targets and stasis crystals deals increased damage. And then there's Served Cold, which is picking up a stasis shard. I just mentioned that with Wind Chill. You also then get your class ability energy up from that. And then when you dodge, you get another melee, and you get all these other things. So it's just one big loop. Also, quick shout out to the weapons of this episode. They all have the Dark Ether Reaper origin trait. Essentially, this origin trait will let these weapons do bonus damage to targets because of the artifact mods. So, if you want to grind out, like this hand cannon, for example, with Headstone, which I can't get to save my life, you can do that and use that as your crystal factory, if you will, and then also do bonus damage to enemies. Now, as for how the Tonics play into this build, I'm not going to go over how the entire system works. I'll be here for 2 hours if that's the case. I will have a dedicated video on Revenant and the Tonic system separately to explain that in case people want to know how all this works, but essentially what you need to know is that the main point here is that the legendary version, as you can see, has double perks. It has Crystalline Converter and Hail the Storm, and then the other one has Wind Chill and Armor of Aramis, and these other ones have only one perk and have a shorter timer. So ideally, if you want to maximize your build, you want to go ahead and unlock the legendary Tonics as fast as you can. Alright, finally, we're going to talk about armor mods. I'm going to mention some of the mods that I think are very helpful to this build. I'm not going to mention every single one, but I will have a dim link for this build down in the description below, so you can copy the build and tweak it if you like, however you want. Alright, here we go. First is the Helmet. If you are using my version of this build with Aggers, you want to have a special ammo finder mod on to just get more ammo for Aggers. One copy of Hands On to gain bonus super energy on melee kills, which will be constant. And then a Siphon mod for whatever weapon you are using, in this case, stasis weapons. In gloves, I just went full on with heavy-handed. 3 copies of these, that way I can just keep making orbs non-stop for every melee kill that I get. In chest, you could put whatever you want, so we're just going to skip around that. In boots, I ended up going with 1 copy of Stasis Weapon Surge, as ability spam is the main component of this build. I'm not going into full-on 3 weapon surges. So the other 2 mods in here are going to be Recuperation, which replenishes your health every time you pick up an orb, and then Insulation, which reduces your class ability cooldown each time that you pick up an orb. And then finally, in the class item, I have 2 specific mods that I think will be really helpful for this. The first one is going to be 2 copies of Outreach, because these will reduce your melee cooldown when using your class ability, and then 1 copy of Powerful Attraction, or you can even flip it and do 2 copies of this and 1 copy of Outreach, because Powerful Attraction will automatically collect orbs nearby you when you activate your dodge, and then if you have 2 copies, then the radius of that is bigger. And then obviously when you collect said orbs, you will get the bonuses that come with it, you know, the weapon surge, replenishing your health, getting your cooldowns decreased, all that good stuff. Overall, I'm pretty happy with this stasis build and how they've handled stasis for this episode. We'll see how it feels, you know, when this artifact is gone. I mean, hell, there's still Act 2 and Act 3 to add more on top, but we'll see how it is. I also am now actually excited to try out Stasis on Titan and Warlock and see what I can come up with them and the new exotic, or maybe do an old exotic. We'll see. So stay tuned for builds on those characters too. Anyway, if you enjoyed watching this absurd build, or maybe you end up playing it on your own and you love it, then please consider subscribing today. It does help the channel grow and is much appreciated on the way to 50k. And if you want to go the extra mile, you can leave a like and or comment below as well. If you don't know what to leave as a comment, you could leave Stasis Hunter as the comment. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.